Good morning. I'm Nancy Horan. Today on 60 Minutes presents a story on the Era of Good Feelings. We begin by discussing the irony behind the name, the Era of Good Feelings. The name suggests a long term of political harmony, sectional unity, strong nationalism, and a booming economy. When in fact this bright fire sizzled to an ashy end and the ice storm began. While the era began with all these wonderful qualities, that is not how it ended. We kick things off with Carol Birkin, a history professor from Brock College, with the Battle of New Orleans.
Hi, I'm Carol Birkin, and first we lead things off by analyzing the Battle of New Orleans, the essential start to the era of good feelings. The Battle of New Orleans, commanded on the American side by Andrew Jackson and on the British side by Edward Pakenham, was far from an equal conflict between the two forces. In fact, Jackson annihilated the British forces with an overwhelming 2,000 British casualties and only 21 American deaths. It all started on January 8, 1815, following the signing of the Treaty of Ghent, the treaty which ended the War of 1812. Well, not really. The British attacked the Americans, and unfortunately for them, they were forced to charge straight at Jackson's line, leading to their immense and humiliating defeat. Jackson's men ambushed the British and left the British wishing they never pursued the battle in the first place. Resulting from this enormous and unexpected American victory, thanks to Jackson, was soaring national pride and a newly found confidence within the once fragile nation. This victory launched the country into the era of good feelings, a time period named very deceivingly, as we will continue to explore after this short break.
Thanks, Carol Birkin. We'll be back after this commercial break with Mary Beth Thornton talking about Jackson and the acquisition of Florida.
Oh my god, it's been 2 hours. Where's our pizza?
This is ridiculous. Have you ever heard of Founding Fathers Pizza? They deliver in 5 minutes or less, or it's free.
Let's call.
It's only been 4 minutes.
It can't be the pizza.
Pizza.
Oh
Founding Fathers Pizza to the rescue.
Hey everyone, it's Mary Beth Norton III here to smack down the hard-cold facts like tuna in a blender. Alrighty, so anyways, let's get into Jackson and the acquisition of Florida, starting from the beginning. John Quincy Adams was Secretary of State under Monroe's presidency. Adams, like his father, was skilled in diplomacy and believed it was a God-given right to expand our country, like father, like son. He also promoted foreign trade and wanted to shrink the European powers in Latin America. Despite the war and the Treaty of Ghent, America and Britain were still not on good terms and wanted to fix their relationship. Essentially, the war was useless, like a burnt tomato. However, their attempt to improve their relationship brought long-term peace and several agreements. The Rush-Bagot Agreement demilitarized British-Canadian borders. This accord limited naval arrangements on the Great Lakes. Another agreement stated that the Congress of 1818 gave the U.S. fishing rights off the coast of Canada, limited British trade with the Louisiana Purchase, and set the boundary between the U.S. and Canada at the Rocky Mountains. In 1818, the Anglo-American Accord sorted out issues from after the War of 1812. It allowed U.S. shippers to have protection from British Navy in the Atlantic. Because of this, America can now be less worried about their Navy and focus on other things. This agreement also improved foreign trade. America had always yearned to get Spanish Florida. It was a safe haven for slaves. During the War of 1812, America acquired West Florida. After the war, Andrew Jackson led his troops into Spanish-controlled East Florida. He ruined Seminole Indian encampments and took over 2 Spanish forts and killed 2 British subjects because they were selling weapons to the Seminoles. Instead of apologizing for Jackson's bombardment of Florida, Adams used this to put pressure on Don Luis de Onís, Spanish foreign minister, so America could get something out of it. In 1819, with the Adams-Onís Treaty, also known as the Transcontinental Treaty of 1819, the United States annexed Florida in exchange for $5 million. Spanish relinquished Oregon, and the United States claimed Texas. This treaty assisted in further expansion across the continent.
Thanks, Mary Beth Thornton. Now here's Grace Littlequack with the Monroe Doctrine.
Good morning, I am Grace Littlequack. For much of Monroe's presidency, he was forced to deal with the growing problem of European countries trying to form colonies on U.S. soil, much like a big grizzly trying to enter a rabbit hole. To fix this problem, he turned to John Quincy Adams, who went on to write the Monroe Doctrine. This was a message to Congress basically stating that European powers were no longer allowed to colonize anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. America would not do anything to these colonies that had already been established, but no more were to be created on the Western Hemisphere. It also stated that any European countries were not to interfere with any American affairs. In return, America would stay out of European affairs as long as it doesn't cause us any harm in any way. In other words, if you don't mess with us, we won't mess with you.
Thanks, Grace Little Quack. We'll be back after this commercial break with George Washington with the Panic of 1819.
I hate physics! I don't understand anatomy!
I hate A-Push! Sorry, Stofie.
Come to Cahokia Learning Center. We'll get those F's into A's.
We used to have F's, and now we have A's. Woo!
Cahokia Learning Center. You better get here. Hello, I'm George Washington. No, not the first president of the United States, but better. Before 1819, we need to take a step backwards and discuss the wave of post-war prosperity between 1815 and 1818. European markets were like hungry hippos for American goods after a generation of war and trade restrictions. American farmers began to expand production and brought new land into cultivation. The availability of land in the West on easy terms of credit sparked a speculative frenzy, and land sales soared like a bald eagle on a clear summer night. State banks and the Bank of the United States fed speculation by making loans in the form of banknotes far in excess of their hard currency reserves. Cotton prices doubled to 30 cents a pound and was the most valuable American export. This staple crop was supposed to be the basis for an intricate credit network anchored in Britain. In 1819, cotton prices sank like the Titanic, and the Panic of 1819 was on its feet and ready to roar. The fall in cotton prices triggered a credit contraction that soon swallowed the American economy whole. A shift in the American policy of the Bank of the United States guaranteed that the economic downturn would settle into a depression. The bank stopped all loans, called in all debts, and refused to honor drafts drawn in the South and West. What type of people do you think this hit the hardest? Well, it was the farmers and businessmen in the South who had mortgaged their economic futures. Southern resentment over this hard time brought on by the low cotton prices focused on the Tariff of 1816. They charged that the tariff unfairly raised their costs and amounted to an unconstitutional tax levied for the sole benefit of Northern manufacturers.
Thanks, George Washington. Here's Janice Wilgehorn with the Missouri Compromise and the increase in sectionalism.
Hello, I'm Janice Wilgehorn, and today I'm going to discuss the Missouri Compromise and its effects on sectionalism. Tensions were high in America, especially between pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions. Missouri's request for admission to the Union as a slave state brought tensions from a simmer to a boil. Missouri's admission as a slave state would upset the careful balance between slave and free states. Congress decided upon a two-part compromise. Missouri was granted its request to join the Union as a slave state. However, Maine would also have to be added, but as a free state. In addition, an imaginary line was drawn across the former Louisiana Territory like a first grader draws a line on his homework. The line established a boundary between free and slave states. Slavery was to be excluded from the Louisiana Purchased lands north of latitude 3630, except for Missouri. Congress was definitely using their noggins when they tried to settle the balance between slave and free states, but their noggins weren't enough. The compromise did more bad than it did good. It led to an increase in sectionalism. The compromise was even called a fireball in the night by my good friend Thomas Jefferson. The Missouri Compromise caused an uproar. Southerners liked the compromise almost as much as a cat likes a dog, because it gave the government the ability to create laws regarding slavery. Most Northerners were not very happy either, since the compromise allowed for the expansion of slavery. The Missouri Compromise was later repealed by the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 and was later declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in the Dred Scott case.
Thanks, Janice Wilgehorn. After this commercial break, we'll be back with Norman Buffy and the election of 1824.
Do you want your kitten to be as ferocious and big as this?
Everybody get up.
Hello, I'm Norm Buffy. Today I'm going to explore the election of 1824 and its ramifications. And yes, that sure does rhyme. But before I discuss that, we need to hop in a time machine back to the election of 1820. Without two-party competition, people had no outlets for expressing dissatisfaction with the Republicans. And no, I do not mean those shopping outlets. Almost immediately after the election, Republicans split into factions and started jockeying up. Monroe had no obvious successor. Five candidates competed to replace him. After the horn hit the doodle wee thing, it was down to Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams. Adams supported a strong central government, and Jackson had no stand on any issue. Although that seems like he's an avocado in the middle of a herd of wolves, it actually helped his case. He was seen as a military hero of the time period. He was unsullied by any connection with Washington politicians, and he got the highest votes, 43% of the popular vote, but no one got the majority in the Electoral College. So it was like throwing a horseshoe on a hot summer's day into the House of Representatives. Henry Clay used his influence as Speaker of the House to support Adams. Adams won the election. Jackson and his followers were outraged, and I mean seriously outraged. Their inner canines came out, and they smelled a corrupt bargain, woof woof, in which Clay bargained the presidency to the highest bidder. Vowing revenge, they began building a new party that would usher in a more democratic era of mass-based politics.
Thanks, Norman Buffy. If you forgot who your host was, I'm Nancy Horan. Today, I hope you learned a lot about the era of good feelings. We must centralize all the information we have learned and ask these questions to ourselves. If the Battle of New Orleans was not won by Jackson, or if it did not happen, would there have been an era of good feelings? What would have happened if Jackson did not gain Florida, but rather more important places like Hawaii, Costa Rica, or the Dominican Republic? And you have to wonder what Adams was thinking when it was named the Monroe Doctrine. I mean, Adams did influence the doctrine. Monroe was being a little greedy by not allowing the doctrine to be called the Monroe and Adams Doctrine. Was the Panic of 1819 such an angry alligator, or was it more of a tame tiger? Why was the Missouri Compromise made if nobody liked it in the first place? Like, hello government, wake up and listen to the people. Am I right, or am I right? Exactly. Also, it should be asked, did Henry Clay bribe people to vote for Adams? In conclusion, the big picture here is, was the era of good feelings really good? Or was it more of in the middle or just flat out bad? That's for you to decide. Hint, it was flat out bad. Till next time, folks, we will be back next week discussing December 24th, 1824, the first fraternity in the United States GP at Princeton University, with another edition of 60 Minutes.
Squad going up.